All right, guys, Miss A here. Coming on today to make a video for you that goes over the integer rules. That is adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing with integers. So one thing, if you remember integers, I have a little picture here. Integers are basically the numbers that are found on a number line. So you've got 0, +1, -1, 2, -2, 3, -3, and it keeps on going in both directions. So one thing you notice here on the number line is that there are no decimals and there's no fractions. That's because integers cannot be decimals and integers cannot be fractions. So we're only dealing with the positive and negative whole numbers, okay? That's what we're gonna be working with today when we're adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. Negatives and positives. So the integer rules, like I said, we're gonna do all 4 operations: add, subtract, multiply, and divide. The first 2 we're gonna look at is adding and subtracting. So whenever we're adding and subtracting, we're actually gonna use the same exact rules. Doesn't matter if you're doing one versus the other. The same rules apply to both operations. So those rules, you're looking for one of 2 things. Are the signs the same or are the signs different? When I say that, I mean, are both numbers negative? Are both numbers positive? Is one number negative and the other number positive? That's what I'm talking about, same sign, different signs. All right, so the first rule is if the signs are the same. When the signs are the same, you add the numbers and keep the sign of the bigger digit. Now, technically, this rule could stop here. It could just say add the numbers and keep the sign. Because if it's 2 negatives, the answer will be negative. If it's 2 positives, the answer will be positive. But I add this last part because I use this in the next rule. So we just keep them on both, so just a little bit easier to remember. And notice I said keep the sign of the bigger digit, not the bigger number, because if you really think about it, a positive is always bigger than a negative. So we don't think of it in that terms. We're going to think of it as the actual digit. What's bigger? What's a good example? -1 or -5. -1 is bigger because it's closer to 0, even though you might say the -5 is bigger, okay? So always look at the digit, not necessarily what the actual number is. That'll make more sense whenever we do an example, okay? So keep this on the bigger digit, and you're going to add the numbers. So the adding and subtracting, same sign, or we're looking for signs that are different. When the signs are different, you're going to subtract the numbers and, again, keep the sign of the bigger digit. So these rules are almost identical. The only difference is one of them has you adding and the other one has you subtracting, okay? So when the signs are the same, you add. When the signs are different, you subtract. I didn't mention this at the beginning, but I hope that while we're going over these rules, you have a piece of paper and a pencil that you're writing down these rules so you have them to refer back to. So if you haven't done so already, pause the video, get your paper and pencil, and come back and join us, okay? Write these things down as we're going over them so you have them to refer to. All right, let's keep going. So that's all we're doing for adding and subtracting. Again, same sign add, different sign subtract, and you always keep the sign of the bigger digit. The next thing we're looking at is multiplying and dividing. And in my opinion, these are actually the easier operations to work on, believe it or not. Multiplying and dividing, again, you're looking for 2 rules. Same signs, the answer will always be positive. And if the signs are different, your answer will always be negative. So up here, if I have 2 negatives, my answer is going to be positive. If I have 2 positives, my answer will be positive. Down here, if I have 1 negative and 1 positive, my answer will always be negative. So one thing that we use in class instead of memorizing these 2 rules is we use the triangle. So students, if you remember us doing this in class, the triangle, you always put a plus sign in the top, and then you put 2 negatives at the bottom. So whenever we're using this triangle, so for example here, if I have -3 times 4, remember that the parentheses means multiplication. -3 times 4, all you do is you cover up on the triangle what you have. So you have a negative and you have a +4. So I'm going to cover up the negative and cover up the positive. What's left is a negative, so my answer was a -12. And then for this one, we have -3 times a -4. So I have a negative and a negative covered up. And then what's left over is a positive. So my answer was a +12. So to me, using the triangle makes it a little bit easier to determine your answer. And that's pretty much all it is for multiplying and dividing, but we will do more examples on those a little bit later. All right, so before we get into some actual examples, I wanted to show you where this would be helpful on your choice board that you're working on for the next 2 weeks. So here's your choice board that y'all should have gotten. You have access either on Google Classroom or you got it from the website. The integer rules are going to be helpful for operations of positive rationals and integers. So the B column all the way down. It's also going to come in, these rules are also, slow down. These rules are also going to come in handy whenever we do, when we solve one variable equations and inequalities, which I'll make a video and post here pretty soon. Okay, so this video is going to be helpful for both of these columns, column B and column D. Okay? All right, so again, hopefully you have these written down, but I will refer to them as we're going over examples. So let's get started. Example number 1. Example number 1 is going to be 5 minus 7. 5 minus 7. So one thing I need you to realize whenever we're doing integers is I need you to get it out of your head that this is only a minus sign, okay? That minus sign, when it's directly in front of the 7, it really makes that 7 a negative 7 as well, okay? So we need to remember, or try to remember, that this minus sign makes whatever number is after it a negative number, okay? So if we look here, what I like to do is actually cover up and look at one number at a time. So if I look at my first number, we notice that 5 is just 5. There's nothing in front of it, meaning it's a positive 5. Okay, we're going to cover up the 5, and now we have a minus 7 or a negative 7. So my two signs here was a positive 5 and then a negative 7. So I have a positive and a negative number. So if we go back to our rules, again, this is a subtracting one, so we're looking at the adding and subtracting rules. These signs are different because they're one's positive and one's negative. So we're going to look at the different sign rule. When the signs are different, subtract the numbers and keep the sign of the bigger digit. So we're going to subtract. The rule says to subtract. Now, obviously, we can't do 5 minus 7 because that 5 is smaller. So I'm just going to put the bigger number first, 7, subtract 5, and you get 2. Okay? So again, the signs were different, so I had to subtract. Flipped it around to put the bigger number on top. 7 minus 5 equals 2. And then after you subtract, it says to keep the sign of the bigger digit. Okay, so if we're looking at just these numbers without any signs, we notice that 7 is bigger than 5. So 7 had a negative sign in front of it. So your answer is a negative 2. Okay? So we subtracted, the signs were different. So put the 7 minus 5 to get 2. The answer was negative because we kept the sign of the bigger digit. 7 is bigger than 5. 7 is negative, so my answer is negative. All right, let's do example number 2 right here beside it. Example 2 is negative 3 plus 8. Negative 3 plus 8. All right, so again, we're going to look at the numbers individually. So the first thing we notice here, if we cover up the plus 8, we have a 3 with the minus sign in front of it, or a negative sign. So the 3 is negative. And then if you look at the 8 has a plus sign in front of it, making the 8 a positive. So again, we've got a negative and a positive number, so the signs are different. So when the signs are different, sorry, my son's being crazy. When the signs are different, we're going to subtract and then keep the sign of the bigger number. So we have to subtract because the signs are different. So we're going to put 8 first because it's the bigger, minus 3. 8 minus 3 gets me 5. And then keep the sign of the bigger digit. 8's the bigger digit. It was positive, so my answer is a positive 5. Okay? Number 3 is negative 4 minus 5. Negative 4 minus 5. So Again, we're going to refer to our rules, but let's look at our numbers first. So if you cover up the 5, you see that the 4 has a negative in front of it. So 4 is a negative. And then if you cover up the negative 4, you see that the 5 has a minus sign in front of it, making the 5 also a negative. So both numbers are negative. So these signs are the same because they're both negative. So when the signs are the same, you add the numbers and again, keep the sign of the bigger digit. So we're going to add them together this time because they were the same. So 4 plus 5 gets me 9. And the bigger digit was 5. It was negative, so my answer is negative. Okay, the signs are the same, -4, -5. So when the signs are the same, you have to add. So we added up 4 plus 5 to get 9. Keep the sign of the bigger digit. 5 is bigger. It was negative, so my answer was negative. All right, and then one other thing I want to talk about is when you see a problem like this. So if we had -3 plus a negative, we'll do -5. -3 plus -5. So one thing we've talked about in class was the fact that we don't like two signs that are touching each other. So right here where you see here, like if you were to read this and not really pay much attention, you might say -3 plus -5, and that seems weird. So what we're going to do anytime we have two signs that are touching each other, we're going to circle those two signs, and we're going to use our triangle to make them into one symbol. So this was a positive and a negative. So we're going to cover up the positive and a negative, and we see that it makes a negative. So these two signs come together and make a minus sign, and then everything else gets rewritten. So the -3 goes in front, and this number, the minus sign, we already combined with this one, so all we do is bring down the 5. Okay, so again, these signs were touching. We don't like that. It looks weird. So we circle them, use our triangle. I'll just keep it here. Use the triangle. A positive and a positive, negative, make a negative. So we put that symbol down here below. And then we just rewrite it. -3, and then we bring down the 5. And now we've got a -3. Cover that up, and we have a -5. So both numbers were negatives. So these signs are the same. So when the signs are the same, you add and then keep the sign of the bigger digit. So add them up. 5 plus 3 gets me 8. Keep the sign of the bigger number. Bigger digit. 5 is the bigger digit. It was negative, so our answer is also negative. So that is what it's like whenever you are adding and subtracting. Again, you're looking for two things. Are the signs the same or are they different? If the signs are the same, you add. If the signs are different, you subtract. And then you always keep the sign of the bigger digit. One more example for adding and subtracting is going to be, because I saw on B1 from your choice board, it had multiple numbers. So do one more and then we'll quickly do multiplying and dividing because that's easy. So we've got the problem 3 minus 4 plus 2 plus 5. I just rewrote this one. You know Miss A. Miss A makes mistakes, which is not unusual for me. So we're just going to restart it. All right, so we have 3 plus a -4. Wow. Plus 2 plus 5. Sorry, guys. Plus a -10. Okay, so this is the problem we're working on. This is going to be number 5. So we had 3 plus -4 plus 2 plus 5 plus a -10. So the first thing we notice, first of all, it's a long problem. And if you notice here, a couple different places, we have back-to-back signs. We don't like that, okay? So right here, we're going to circle those two, and we'll circle those two. Now, these parentheses are just representing, they want to make sure you know that this is a -4 and this is a -10. That's all the parentheses mean in this case. They just do that so you don't get it confused and think it goes somewhere else. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use our triangle, and we're going to take these symbols here and we're going to make them into one sign. So a positive and a negative make a negative. So this one's gone, put a minus sign, then you put your 3, then you put your 4, plus 2 plus 5 doesn't change. And then the positive and negative here, again, make a negative, and then you bring down your 10. And now, I'm actually going to show you 2 ways to solve this problem. The first way is exactly like we did up here. We're going to take it 2 numbers at a time and follow our rules. So the first thing I'm going to solve is this problem. So we have 3 minus 4. So 3 is a positive, 4 is a negative. So these signs are different. When they're different, again, hopefully you have this. When the signs are different, you subtract. No, stop, baby. Sorry. So the signs are different, so we're going to subtract. So we're going to do 4 minus 3, which gets me 1. And then keep the sign on the bigger digit. 4 is the bigger digit. It was negative. And then we rewrite everything else. Plus 2, plus 5, minus 10. We're going to keep doing that 2 numbers at a time until we get down to our final answer. So now I'm going to do these. Signs are different because that's a negative, that's a positive. When they're different, you subtract. 2 minus 1 is 1. Keep the sign on the bigger digit. This number was bigger, so it's positive. Number stays positive 1. Bring down your plus 5, your minus 10. Now we're going to do these 2. That's easy. 1 plus 5 equals 6. Now we have the minus 10. Minus 10. And now our last problem is we've got a positive number and we have a negative number. So these signs again are different. So we're going to subtract. 10 minus 6 gets me 4. So my answer is 4. Don't forget to keep the sign of the bigger number or bigger digit. 10's bigger, it's negative. So my answer is negative. I'm sorry. Noah's over here being crazy, being loud, getting right beside me. So the answer is negative 4. So that one takes a little bit more, a little bit longer of a process, but I am going to show you a little shortcut we could do as well. So again, the original problem was 3, or actually after we combined, we got down to this problem. We had 3 minus 4 plus 2 plus 5 minus 10. So what we could do instead of working on them one by one, what we could do is just make a column of all my numbers that are negative, all my numbers that are positive, and then combine them at the end. So my positive numbers are 3, 2, and 5. My negative numbers were negative 4 and negative 10. No. So all these numbers are positive. So again, when the signs are the same, you add. So we're going to add those up. 3 plus 2 is 5. 5 plus 5 makes 10. Everything was positive, so it stays positive. These numbers, again, are the same, so we're going to add. We get 14. The bigger digit was 10, so we can make it negative 14. Now, finally, we have 10 minus 14. So these signs are different. Positive 10, negative 14. When they're different, we subtract. We get 4, and then keep the sign of the bigger digit. 14 was bigger, so the answer is a negative. Same exact answer we got up here, just a little bit, I think this is actually a little bit simpler of a process. Just grouping all your positives together, all your negatives, combining them, and then doing your integer rule for different signs. Okay, so that was quite a few examples for adding and subtracting. Okay, baby. Okay, baby. That is quite a few examples for adding and subtracting. I'm just going to do a very few for multiplying and dividing because I do think that's the easier process. So remember, when we're multiplying and dividing, we're going to be using the triangle. So you draw a triangle, draw a line in the middle, plus sign goes to the top, draw a line and put 2 negatives here. And then what's nice about this is you're going to do exactly what it says and then use the triangle to determine your sign. So my first example here is, let's do negative 5 times 4. Remember, the dot means multiplication. So first thing we're going to do is multiply 5 times 4, which gets me 20. And then we see that we have a negative and a positive. So we cover up a negative, cover up a positive. So our answer is going to be a negative. So our final answer is negative 20. All right, so number 2, if I had, let's say, negative 3 times negative 3. So right here, the parentheses mean multiplication, just like the dot does. So first thing we're going to do is multiply 3 times 3, which gets me 9. And then we're going to we have a negative and a negative. So we cover up the negative, and what's left is a positive. So my answer is positive 9. This also works for division. So if I had 10 divided by negative 2, so the little dash here means divide. We have a positive 10 divided by negative 2. First thing we're going to do is divide like normal. 10 divided by 2 gets me 5. And then we have a positive and a negative. Positive and a negative makes a negative. All right. So that was a pretty quick, simple example for multiplying and dividing. Just make sure you use that triangle, cover up. The only thing the triangle does not work on is 2 positives. But 2 positives always equal a positive. I don't care what you're doing, adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing. If both numbers are positive, your answer will be positive. But make sure you use the triangle for multiplying and dividing. Just cover up whatever you have, plain and simple. And then adding and subtracting is a little bit more complicated, but as long as you have these rules that you can refer to, it makes it a little bit easier. All right, hope this video is helpful. I know it's kind of long. Feel free to pause it, rewind it, replay whatever parts you need a little bit, maybe you need to hear a second or third time to help you understand it. Hope this helps, guys. Bye, miss y'all.